Hey, everyone, it's just about 10 o'clock. I'll give it another minute and then we'll get started, okay? Okay, so we shall get started. Please, as we go through this, ask me questions as we go. This is one of the issues that I see come up pretty frequently, and I think there is a lot of confusion among everyone about how you handle a counteroffer. And the issue always is, well, does the seller sign the actual contract form and so on? So we're going to go through this. And the data source for everything that you're going to see here is two attorneys, the legal hotline. Okay, I can also send you, if you're interested, the sections of Florida contract law that a lot of this was taken from directly. So this is not me. This is all based on legal advice. So we'll go through it, stop and ask me. I know when I originally said what I was going to do today was incredibly ambitious until I started to get into this. And I said, okay, let's narrow it down to the two areas where we seem to have the most questions, and that's counteroffers and financing contingency. Then there will be, over the next month or two, we'll look at the other issues that people have brought up. So let's get started. We're going to start in the counteroffer. So what is the definition of a counteroffer, right? So Merriam-Webster defines a counteroffer as a return proposal made by one who has rejected a proposal. In other words, when one party declines the original offer and responds with a new or modified offer for consideration. So that is the definition. Okay. So next, we're going to talk about counteroffers. The key legal principle is that a counteroffer has to follow the mirror image rule. So what do we mean by that? Under Florida contract law, an offer must be accepted exactly as written to create a binding contract. If any term is changed, even slightly, it is not an acceptance, but it becomes a counter. That means you don't have a binding contract until both parties agree to the same terms in writing. And I highlighted sign and deliver. If you go through the as-is contract, you're going to see the word deliver constantly through that contract, okay? And that means it has to be delivered to the other party. In our cases, it means to the other agent. Any back and forth changes are legally considered negotiation, not acceptance, until everyone signs the same version. Okay, and throughout this entire thing, we're going to talk about how exact you have to be. Right?
Ruth, this is Alina. I just have one quick question. So
Sure.
when you say sign and deliver, say my buyer signs a counteroffer, or my seller signs the counteroffer. So he's agreeing to the counteroffer that was offered by the buyer. And it comes back to me at 11 o'clock at night, which I'm already asleep. So does that mean that the effective date is the day that it got sent to my email?
Technically, yes.
Okay.
Okay. In most cases, the effective date, though, you'll get into a conversation with the other agent, and the effective date will be the date of the last signature. So, Jeff, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, so technically it's got to be delivered, and delivery to the agent is the same as delivering it to the customer. So when it's delivered to you, Alina, then it's considered technically delivered. So
Okay.
and
So it's the day it hits my email.
It's
correct.
delivered, yes.
Okay.
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 Okay. So What does the counteroffer do? Well, it does a number of things, right? You've all written them, or most of you have written them. A counteroffer rejects the buyer's original offer and presents new terms. The buyer must accept it by signing for it to become binding. The counteroffer becomes part of the contract once both parties sign it. And what are the common reasons? Well, you all know what they typically are. It's the price, it's a closing date, can be any terms that are changing what is in the as-is contract. So these are the things that you see most commonly. Sometimes you're adding additional terms or conditions. Okay. And then other times you may be incorporating additional riders, such as the Monroe County local rider, the flood condo, things that were missed in the original offer. Okay, or things that the seller wants to add. And that's pretty standard, what we normally see. So what's the process? The buyer submits an offer and it becomes an offer only when signed and delivered to the seller. The seller can either accept it and sign it, and the contract is binding once it's signed by the seller, or the seller has the option to reject the original offer and issue a counteroffer. Everybody's clear on that, right? So the buyer reviews the seller's counteroffer. If the buyer accepts all terms, signs and delivers it, there's your binding contract. If the buyer then changes anything that's in that counteroffer, so it's the buyer countering a counteroffer, all the previous counteroffers are now void. So you have to remember that. So your seller issues counteroffer number one, your buyer looks at it, says, I want to change it. Now, counteroffer number two comes into play. So counter number one is dead. It is null and void. You have to remember that. And then we'll talk about how you handle that if that occurs. Negotiation continues until both parties sign the same version of the agreement with identical wording and terms. Only then does the contract become enforceable. Okay. So it's just some of the housekeeping. How do we do this? The seller receives the offer and decides to counter. So what do you have to do? Seller has to determine the changes that are to be negotiated with the buyer. So that's a conversation with you about what those changes are going to be. But you have to remember, the seller has to check the counter offer box on page 12 of the contract because they have to display intent. Their intent is to counter this contract. Okay, so you can't forget to do that. All right. Then, of course, you write up the counter offer. And when it's complete, the seller will then sign a counter offer form. This is what it looks like. If you are not familiar with it, it is in dot loop. It's there. Okay. So let's talk about the issues that come up.
Hey,
This
Ruth,
is what yes.
sorry, real quick. The little teeny tiny counter offer box, is that ever going to become like a more prominent, or have at least initial boxes near it where everybody's got to initial, oh, look, yes, that's a counter. There's a counter attached.
No control. None of us control what the Florida Association of Realtors is going to do with format. That's up to them. So I can't answer that. My suspicion is it's not going to change because it's not a big issue for them. So I would tell you, no, in my view, it's never going to change. Okay.
Okay.
But you have to be aware of it. So what's the big issue that comes up with counteroffers? Well, and where do you get the most pushback from uninformed agents? It's whether a seller may properly sign a buyer's initial purchase offer while simultaneously making a counteroffer with different terms, or whether signing the original offer constitutes acceptance that precludes a valid counteroffer. In simple terms, should the seller, when he's issuing a counteroffer, go back and sign the actual contract? The answer to that is absolutely no. Okay. And why? A seller may not sign a buyer's initial offer when making a counteroffer. Signing an offer constitutes acceptance under contract law, creating a binding agreement on those terms. A counteroffer, by contrast, operates as a rejection of the original offer and proposes new terms. These are mutually exclusive actions. The seller must do one of two things: either accept the buyer's initial offer by signing it, or reject it by making a counteroffer, but they can't do both. All right. The counteroffer, when signed by the buyer, represents the sole binding agreement. So under no circumstances should the seller go back and sign the signature page in the contract. Okay? All right.
We've been told to do that.
No, you have never been told to do that, Annalise.
Banks make us do it.
Actually,
Yes, we
Ruth,
have.
We're
we
gonna-
have.
We're gonna
uh,
be. We're
It,
gonna
it would
talk,
be like after everything else is done, but I've been told that mortgage companies want to see the
we're gonna get to that, Naira,
Oh,
we're
okay,
gonna get to
sorry.
that in a minute, we're gonna
Right.
get to all of that in a minute. That's the thing that we're gonna clarify here, okay? So we're gonna talk about it in a minute, right? Okay. So what happens if the seller does go back and sign the initial offer after the counter offer has been signed by the seller? It results in the high risk of confusion over contract terms and governing document. It can result in potential disputes over what provisions apply, and there are questions regarding the realtor's professional judgment and practices. That is right out of Florida contracts. Okay? The following language is to be added to the additional terms. So if you do have an issue with the seller signing the contract, then you have to add this statement to the additional terms. This document is for informational purposes only. Okay?
Wait a
Right.
minute, wait a minute.
Can you repeat
Ruth,
that,
where
please?
yeah, where does that go?
In additional terms of the contract. Okay? You shouldn't have the seller sign the contract form, but if you do, then you have to add this, that signature is for informational purposes only. That way it makes it clear, because you remember the signed counteroffer form, that plus the initial offer form, those two documents together, they create the contract. Okay? All right, so
Hey,
the
Ruth,
yes.
I'm sorry. Can you go back to that just for 1 second? Can you give us like a real world example of that? Because it does sound a little bit confusing.
If you're having difficulty getting the seller to understand, or you don't understand, do not let your seller sign the contract, because if you do that, it conflicts with the counteroffer. You can't have two documents signed by the seller. Okay, that's what we're saying. They conflict. You cannot do that. But if you do that, then you have to label that signature with this language in the additional terms, that this document is for informational purposes only, because the counteroffer, when signed, that is the final contractual signature and constitutes the binding agreement. Does that make it clearer?
So, yeah, so let me just ask, because if you're looking at the purchase agreement, right, the main body of the contract,
Mhm.
and there's been some back and forth, then if you add this to the would if you add this statement to the main contract, that would, if we're using dot loop, that would take off any signatures, would it not?
Because there are no signatures. There is no seller signature on the contract initially. So you have to go back and put it in, and then in additional terms, you have to add this. Does that
Okay,
make
so
sense?
bottom line is the seller should not sign the main contract until
Never.
all the terms of the counteroffer, well, until all the counteroffer has been,
It's
that
been
round
signed.
has been completed.
Right. But
Got
they
it.
shouldn't, but this is only in the case if they do that. They should never do that.
Okay, what
Right,
about
they
the
should-
initials on the pages?
I'm getting to that, Frank.
Okay, got it.
Okay, yeah, I'm getting to that. Okay, any more questions about this? Okay, so here we are. The seller must initial the bottom of each page of the buyer's initial offer. This is confirmation and verification that the seller has received each page, not that they have read it or accepted the terms. But this is just saying, I received it. Should there be some issue, a conflict between the parties later on, and it happens to, let's say, page 3 of the contract is where the issue is, if the seller's initials are not there and it goes into some form of litigation or something, then the seller can say, I never got that. I didn't know. Okay, so you have to prevent that from happening. So the initials on the bottom are not acceptance. It's just really, I got it. I'm verifying that I got the page. Okay. All right. So what's the proper procedure? Well, we just kind of talked about that. Leave the buyer's offer unsigned on the seller's signature line, prepare the written counteroffer stating the seller's proposed terms, establish the acceptance date, and this is something Brian really wanted us to focus on today, that understanding the acceptance date of counteroffers. If you are adding documents, they have to be attached so that when you do submit it back to the other agent, you have the contract form, you have the counteroffer form, and then if you're adding something like the Monroe County local rider or a condo rider or something like that, all of that has to go to the other agent. Sign the counteroffer document and submit with buyer's initial offer to the buyer with all of those things. If the buyer then accepts the counteroffer by signing it, now you have a binding contract, and it's all based on the revised terms in the counteroffer. Questions about any of that?
Yeah,
Okay.
Ruth, I just want to ask, so the Monroe County rider, the lead-based paint, all those, they have to all be signed and received before it's effective, correct?
Yes. Well,
Okay.
no. Yeah,
If
yes,
they're
to answer your
attached to the
question,
con-
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because if you're sending out new documents for them, yes.
Right, so when you send over the counter offer, you should send all of those documents also so that they all get signed and
Yes.
initial,
Yeah,
correct?
yes, that's what we're saying here, that if you're adding something, which we see a lot, we see a lot of you add the Monroe County rider or the flood or whatever you're doing. Those documents have to go, and yes, the buyers have to sign it at the same time that they're going to sign the counteroffer form.
Right, okay.
Mhm. And you got to get them back.
You gotta get it back before
You
you're.
got to get them back. Yeah, you
Okay.
got to get them back.
So Ruth, what,
Yes.
another one kind of going on what, Adeline was saying, so once the agent gets them back in their inbox, that's when they're accepted. Is that
Yes.
when the clock starts ticking? Or for, all the, time sensitive, what am I trying to say? Everything that's like, for home inspections and things like that? Is it the day that we get them back? When they hit the inbox, or the day that the last person signed?
Day the last person signed.
Okay.
Okay.
Day
Yeah,
one.
but do we count that date?
Day one is the next day. Day
Yes.
one starts the
Day
next
one
day.
is the next day. Okay,
Right.
good.
Okay.
Yeah, but I would think it's the day of receipt, not the last date of signature. Because if it's left in a desk drawer, it's not, I would think.
Yeah,
If,
but you might not get that back in until 4 or 5 o'clock that day. How are you gonna count that day as? Like, okay, the escrow's due in 3 days, you can't count that day.
no, it's 3 days after that,
It's 3
but
days.
Right, you
but
don't
if-
count the actual day, you start day one,
right,
right?
but it's not to me, it's not I mean, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but if you counter and then the people, they sign the counter until that last signature is sent back to the other party, I would think you don't have a contract until the receipt of that last signature by the other party.
Doesn't
Not
it
just
say
the
when it's
signature date.
delivered,
Right,
the contract?
right.
I agree, Annalise, because yeah, what if the buyer's agent held on to it for 2 days after they signed it? You wouldn't
Right.
know you're under contract.
Right.
Then they're a bad agent.
Yeah.
Ruth,
Because
I
I
have a,
think.
s- oh,
it
sorry, Natalie,
says
go
that-
ahead.
No, that's okay. I mean, I think right in the contract, it says the delivery of it.
That's what it says.
Yeah, so it's not like, even if you sent it to me and, I didn't confirm receipt, but you have that it was delivered.
The actual language says the effective date of this contract shall be the date when the last one of the buyer and seller has signed or initialed and delivered this office or final offer or final counter offer. That becomes the effective date.
Yeah.
So the word delivered is throughout this entire contract. So,
Correct.
okay. So, what we're going to do is we're going to have the seller initial all of the initial boxes on the contract and not have them sign. Okay. So what happens now, and this goes back to your original question, Naira, what about the lender? So we've got a contract, counteroffer's been signed by both parties. Now we have the lender says, okay, I want to see the seller's signature on the contract form. Okay, so how do we do that? All right, so how we do that is the initial offer was legally rejected by the seller because as soon as that counteroffer is issued and signed, that's rejection of the counteroffer of the original contract. Under the contract law, the original offer is terminated and cannot be subsequently accepted. Okay. Remember, the counteroffer is just making changes to certain provisions in the contract. So the two together make up the contract. The net effect of signing the original offer post counteroffer, there is really no legal effect because the original offer cannot be revived after rejection by a counteroffer. Okay. So actually, legally, any signatures on it are legally meaningless. The counteroffer controls. It's the sole binding agreement between the parties. And document conflict. Two signed documents with differing terms and creates confusion over governing contractual terms. And this gets back to us as realtors. It will become a procedural irregularity if we have a situation like that. And it represents improper real estate practice and raises questions about proper transaction handling. Okay, so what do we do? So how do we satisfy the lender's request? Very simply, we want to do that. Okay, so below is the standard clean and legally safe language that we want you to use, commonly used in Florida real estate practice when a lender requests the seller's signature on an initial offer after fully executed counteroffers in place. Okay, we don't want conflicts. We want to be clear, but we also want to give the lender what they need because we don't want to have any issues with interfering with the progress of the contract. So here's your language. So Naira, if we have a lender come in and they ask to have the signature put on the original contract form, we do that, but then we add this language. Seller's signature on the buyer's initial offer is provided solely to satisfy lender requirements and shall not modify, amend, or supersede the terms of the fully executed counteroffer, whatever date that is. The parties acknowledge and agree that the counteroffer controls and constitutes the full, complete, and binding agreement between buyer and seller. If you want to, you can add this. In the event of any conflict between the initial offer and the executed counteroffer, the executed counteroffer shall govern. Naira, does that answer your question?
So then we go back and have them, they can sign it at that point if it's required by the bank, by the mortgage lender. And then we
Right.
just add this
To additional terms of the contract.
under additional terms. Okay, just put a date there when we're doing this.
Well, you're going to have you got the seller's signature.
Okay,
That's the date.
Ruth,
Okay.
does the buyer has to initial that additional term?
No,
Thank you.
no.
okay, thanks. Okay.
Okay, this is just to clarify that the adding that signature has no impact, okay, and we're satisfying the lender. Okay, but it happens a
That's
lot.
great. Oh, yeah, it's always
It happens
tricky
a
and it
lot.
always freaks me out.
Yeah, especially if you're doing FHA. Okay, so questions about this, like why we're gonna do this?
No, but I want to ask, are you going to send this to us so that we can
Yes.
copy this verbiage? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so the initial offer and counter offer are now one document, right? And are submitted to the selling agent, but the selling agent insists that the initial offer must be signed. So we just talked about that. So how do you argue that when the co-op agent pushes back on you and says, no, I want to see your seller's signature? So before we agree to do that and put in the other language, you need to refer to the counteroffer form itself, because it very clearly says that the initial offer executed by the party making the offer and dated, whatever that date is, for the sale and purchase of, and then you have the address of the property, as amended only by this counteroffer executed by all parties, is accepted and shall constitute the full and entire contract. This counteroffer does not include terms and conditions of any other counteroffer unless restated herein, which we're going to talk about in a minute. All terms and conditions of the initial offer remain the same except for the following. Okay, so all it says is everything in the initial offer is accepted except the following changes. Okay, so you,
Very
yeah,
confusing.
I'm sorry. So that's what you have to remember. And there are a lot of agents out there that don't understand this. Okay. So if they understand it correctly, there's no need to go back and have the seller sign that contract form. Okay. Because he's accepting everything that's in there with the exception of what you're going to put forth in the counteroffer. Now, it does say this counteroffer does not include terms and conditions of any other counteroffer unless restated. So we're going to talk about that, and that can be tricky. So all I did here is take that language right from the counteroffer and restate it here. Okay. You cannot refer to prior counteroffers. They are null and void when another counteroffer is prepared. I had an agent who insisted on doing this. He would get involved in extensive negotiations. So there'd be counteroffers 1 and 2 and 3. And he felt that by referring back to a previous counteroffer, that was acceptable to bring over terms that were in that initial counteroffer to have them in the final counteroffer. Well, you can't do that. He was the same guy that would have a counteroffer out there and then go back in and say, well, we're going to attach those, we're going to go back into the contract form and we're going to put them in additional terms. I mean, it was beyond belief. But in any case, as soon as that next counteroffer is executed, the one before it is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. So that's what you have to be careful of. So if there are things in the first counteroffer that everybody agrees to, you have to restate them in the next counteroffer if you want to keep them. Okay, everybody.
And I always just get confused because there could be, 4. It could be counteroffer number 4. So then numbers 1, 2, and 3 can just go away, be ripped up and thrown away. They don't exist, or they need to.
Legally, they're gone.
Legally, they're gone. Okay, so they don't have to remain part of that package because they're gone.
We like to see them. Okay, because we want to be able to see the trail. Okay, so they have to stay in dot loop. We have to see them. But you have to be careful. So let's say there's something in counteroffer number 1 that you want to keep. And now we're in and maybe there's something, we have counteroffer number 2. So if you want to keep that item that was in counteroffer number 1, you've got to restate it in counteroffer number 2. So now you're in counteroffer number 2. So you've got the item from counter number 1 that you put in counteroffer number 2. Now there are a couple of things in counteroffer number 2 that you want to carry over into counteroffer number 3. So you've got to make sure you're doing that correctly. So you're taking those acceptable items and making sure they're restated in any subsequent counteroffers. It can get confusing. Okay, but you have to remember that.
You just cleared that up pretty well for me, though. Thanks.
Okay, anytime I can help you, Naira. Okay, so what's the other approach? This is the approach that's not really something that I care for, but we do see a lot of people who just mark up the contract form, right? We all see them. I'm sure that we've all done them. And so we're saying, no, it's not the best practice. The best practice is always to use the counteroffer form. Why? It's cleaner. It's precludes really any confusion about what the changes are. But if for some reason you're going to take this approach, it happens, okay? But if you have multiple changes, I mean, I'm sure Jeff and Frank can share horror stories where they've seen counteroffers with so many strikeouts and so many initial boxes. And you get to a point, well, who signed what? The strikeouts may or may not be correct. It can be a problem. So we urge you not to do that. If it's one change, something simple, you can go ahead and do that. How many of you don't use the counteroffer form? How many of you prefer to do changes right on the contract?
I have rewritten an entire contract. Remember that one?
Yeah, I know a few of you do that, and that you got to be careful with. So we prefer, I'm sure Jeff and Frank would agree with me. We really don't want you marking up the contract if it's really extensive, all right, because you can cause a lot of confusion. Remember, you've got that mirror image rule where the acceptance must exactly match the offer. So handwritten changes, even if initial, can be a problem, all right? So you want to keep yourself out of that, okay? You don't want to get into it. And you can end up actually not have a binding contract, and you can end up with a dispute. But if you must, okay, and sometimes you do, if you don't have the counteroffer form available, of course you always do, it's in dot loop, then clearly cross out the old term, write the new term legibly, have both buyer and seller initial every change. All right. We suggest that if you do that, then add to the additional terms, this document as modified and initialed by all parties constitutes the complete agreement. Okay, we don't advise it. Frank, do you advise them to do changes on the contract form?
That can drive you crazy.
Yes.
'Cause
So
especially with using the digital initials and signatures, right? So because the digital initials get overlapped and
mhm.
sometimes you can lose the date and because it gets overlapped by another initial.
Yeah.
And then when there's two, I've seen some that are 2 or 3 times on
Yeah.
the same line.
Yeah, and I've seen people that don't have control of the strike through feature in dot loop, and they tend to extend it a little too far and don't realize it. So you got to be careful, and if you're doing it handwritten, a lot of times it's not legible. You really can't even discern what the change is, right? A lot of times when you do this, if there's extensive changes, the lender's going to come back and want you to do a clean copy. Right. So this is our
Hey,
best
Ruth.
advice. Yeah.
Question on it, because I have had that happen where I do not like marking up the contract, but where it has happened and then the lender will come back and ask for a cleaner version of it. That language that was used with the counter offer, is there any language when the lender requests that needs to be put in there? Because if you're electronically signing, the dates are gonna change.
Yeah, there is. And I will get it to you. I did not put it in here, but yes, there is language that has to go with that.
Yeah, okay.
It goes into additional terms. So I will get it to all of you. There is
Okay.
specific language for that.
Okay.
Okay. You have to be, I know some of you, instead of using the counteroffer form if it's a lot or marking it up, will rewrite the contract. You have to be very careful when you do that. Okay, very careful. So how do you write a counteroffer? I see some interesting things when I look at counteroffers. You have to number the counteroffers sequentially. Okay. You have to be exact in filling out names of the seller and the buyer and so on. It has to match what was on the names and everything have to match what was on the initial offer. I have seen them somehow become different. So you got to be careful. Everything you do has to be exact. You want to include the line number of the contract provision that you're making changes to. If you're going to add additional documents like the Monroe County local rider, when you put them in the counteroffer, you have to use the revision number because there's so many different revisions floating around out there. You have to be careful and have the correct date of the revision to avoid ambiguity. If you're going to add additional terms, or if there are provisions that are going into this counteroffer and you're writing them up, use clear and concise language and establish a clear acceptance date. Okay, and we're going to talk about acceptance now. So in the contract itself, it says under line 3, time for acceptance of offer and counteroffers and effective date. So we just read the effective date piece, but if not signed by buyer and seller and an executed copy delivered to all parties on and before whatever your acceptance date is, this offer shall be deemed withdrawn and the deposit, if any, will be returned to the buyer. But it does say, unless otherwise stated, time for acceptance of any counteroffer shall be within 2 days after the day the counteroffer is delivered. So I don't know what I did to this poor slide, but that's the language in the contract. Okay. So, Alina, you want to tell me what that means? Did we lose Alina?
Yeah, no, I just had to find my microphone button. Yeah, you said even if it comes in at 11:59, it's got to my inbox that day, so it is that day, not the day that I open up my email.
Exactly. So the time for acceptance for a counteroffer here is shall be within 2 days after the day the counteroffer is delivered. Okay. So the buyer has 2 days, right, after the seller has issued the counteroffer. Remember, the day ends, Alina just said it, the day ends at 11:59 p.m. unless you state a different time in the contract. All right. So the effective date of this contract shall be the date when the last one of the buyer and seller has signed or initialed and delivered this offer or final counteroffer. That's your effective date. So this is the actual provision from the contract.
So
it did,
to
yeah.
clarify that, say I get it at 11:59 p.m. on a Tuesday.
Yes,
So is that day one, Tuesday? And then it has to be done by Wednesday by 11:59? Or is that Thursday by 11:59?
it's Thursday by 11:59, I think. Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, so if you think about when it says 1 day from the effective date or
Mhm.
1 day after the effective date, people get confused. So
Yep.
replace that word from the effective date with today. So what if we say 1 day from today? 1 day from today is not today, right? It's tomorrow. So if you think about it that way, or 2 days from today is not, tomorrow, it's 2 days. So
Right.
just think about that when you're confused about that. Switch that word effective date to the word today so that you can get in your mind how that works. The effective
Got it.
day is the day of the effective date. Day one is always the next day. Day one is the next day, always.
Right.
Okay,
And the one thing that you all should do, best practice, is once you do have a signed contract, make sure that you're in contact with the other agent and you're all in agreement on what the dates are. Okay, and then all of that is communicated to both the buyer and seller once we have agreement between everybody, because I have seen countless times where agents disagree, or they're counting differently, or they're interpreting differently. So you got to make sure that you're all in agreement. So on item 3, it says, unless otherwise stated, time for acceptance. We just went through this. However, the counteroffer form provides the option to set a specific date. So that makes it easier for you. Okay. So let's take a look at this then. Always remember too, the 2 exceptions to, if you go into the contract, you have a provision in there called time, right? And that talks about weekends and legal holidays. The 2 exceptions to that provision in the contract are acceptance of an offer, which includes counteroffers, and effective dates. They can fall on any day. They can fall on a legal holiday. They can fall on a Saturday or a Sunday. That's fine. It's the only 2 exceptions in the contract. It's unlike an escrow deposit. If that falls on a weekend, what does it do? It falls to Monday. Okay. So these are the 2 exceptions to that. Okay. So you now have in the counteroffer, if you look at the counteroffer form, it says, if not signed by buyer and seller, an executed copy delivered to all parties on or before. So now you can put in a specific date to end the confusion. All right. Okay. You can say it's due November 13th or whatever. If you leave this blank, then it's going to fall back to the original provision on the first page of the contract that says within 2 days after the counteroffer is delivered, if left blank. Okay, it's going to default to that. So using the counteroffer form, you can take away all of that confusion and you can put in a specific date here as to when you want the counteroffer accepted. Okay? I think that makes life a lot easier for everybody.
Ruth, you can put in a
Definitely.
specific date in the as-is contract though, too.
Of course you can.
Oh, okay. I
course
thought
you
you were
can.
saying it was only on the counteroffer. I was like, wait, what?
No. You can, but most people don't, but you can, and you can be very specific in the contract itself about when you want the counteroffer back. All right.
Especially if there's multiple offers, it's very helpful.
Mhm. So, again, if using the counteroffer form, again, you can be extremely specific. I would encourage you to do that.
So Ruth,
thing-
on the holidays and the weekends, are you saying the effective date can land on Christmas? Or does
Yes.
it get bumped to the next day?
No, the two provisions in the contract that, the time where we talk about weekends and legal holidays doesn't apply to acceptance of offers or effective date of contract. So if the effective date of contract falls on Christmas, it's Christmas.
Okay,
Okay,
got it. Yep.
okay. This is one of the things you gotta be careful to understand. If you're changing the purchase price in the counteroffer, if you're doing that, okay, you have to take a look at all of the other figures below it and make the necessary changes. You have to remember that. So if you change your purchase price and there's financing, all right, you got to look at how does that affect the financing and does it affect the balance to close? You make any change, okay, the balance, if it's a cash deal, it's going to change balance to close. It could impact the escrow. So you may have to make sure that when you're doing a counteroffer, you restate all of those things. It's not just saying I'm changing the purchase offer to 1.5. Okay, well, what does that do to escrow deposits, financing, and balance to close? And you have to restate all of that in your counteroffer. If you're marking up the contract, you've got to make those changes. You can't forget about that. And unfortunately, I see that a lot. So what is it? You have to remember to do that. So what does it look like? So I put a counter offer together. So we could take a look at it. When you're doing the counter offer, you got to make sure you've got the proper names and you're carrying them over from the initial offer. You're going to put in the address of the property. We talked about this, the counter offer. Now you're making change to purchase price, and we're going to change the closing date. So breaking this up a little bit, this is what it would look like. This is just a sample because we're going to change. But anyway, I'll get to some of this. Purchase price 1.5. We're restating the escrow, the second escrow. We're restating the financed amount, and we're changing the balance to close. So if you're changing that purchase price, you have to restate the rest of it in the counteroffer. You can't just do a price change. Okay.
Hey, Ruth,
Well-
if the escrow, like if the escrow amounts don't change, do you have to restate those in there?
Yes, you do. You have to restate everything.
Can I ask you a
Okay.
question also to go back to dates?
Yes.
All right, when you have a counter date or whether it's the regular as is offer acceptance date, and on the other side they not necessarily intentionally treat it like a suggestion as opposed to this is a deadline. Maybe they have multiple people that have to sign, or it's difficult, it's an elderly person, whatever, and they're like, well, it might not get back to you exactly then. All right, so that date comes and goes, but you're still waiting because they are trying to come back. How do you fix that where that that original offer is not null and void like it suggests it is, or actually is, when they come back and respond after that date, either just signing everything like, yes, we're under contract, like how do you fix that contract from being null and void because that date came and went? You have to address it somehow, and I don't know how to do that.
Would you like to answer that question?
Wait, who, what?
Frank, I just asked Frank if he'd like to answer that question.
No, I didn't hear the question. I was working on something. Sorry.
That's okay. If you say, let's just play, it could be a counter, it could be the original as is going to you know, the seller for signature, but the seller has to get like 5 different signatures and they're not going to be able to do it in time. So they verbally say, oh, I might need more time. And then they eventually do come back with everything signed, but that date of acceptance came and went. So to me, that is really null and void, and whether they signed it or not doesn't matter because that offer is null and void. So how do you correct that in language somewhere that would say this brings this offer back to life?
Yeah, so you're correct, Annalise. Then the offer would be null and void because you've passed the date of acceptance.
Yep.
But if you complete an addenda to the agreement that would either state that buyer and seller agree that the date of acceptance is XYZ, right? Then that would be sufficient. You don't have to, you don't have to overcomplicate it. Just all you're doing is just stating that buyer and seller agree, date of acceptance shall be, 11/12/2025. And making sure that all the dates on those signatures and initials are either, the last is on that date, because the buyer also has to do that, right? So the buyer has to come back and sign that counter. So make sure that the dates are, coincide with whatever date you've put into that addenda.
Right. Annalise, because it happens a lot.
Yeah, and
Happens a lot.
to me, it
Thank
never
you, Frank.
gets corrected. So it's like you're
Right.
going to the closing table without a valid contract. It's unnerving.
Right. What I tried to do, this is a pretty simple one that I wrote, tried to cover, a few things. Again, remember, if you're changing things, you have to reference the line number in the contract that you're modifying. So always make sure you have those here. If you're adding documents, that's line 586 on, I think it's page 12. You're just saying, I'm adding these documents. And again, you have the date of the documents. And then I had additional terms, strike through seller to replace dishwasher prior to closing, something like that. So this is a very simple example, but it is an example of how to write a clean counteroffer. Okay, make it clear. And sometimes you're gonna have, you may have some very extensive additional terms. So again, clear, concise, easily understandable. And then here I put in a specific date. Okay, the date that I wanted acceptance, just to make it clearer. Okay.
I have a question. You just told somebody that even if the escrow amounts do not change, you still have to put them in the counteroffer.
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
that correct?
Yes, you have to restate.
Why?
Everything. Because you've changed this, and to make it clear to everybody, this is still what the contract is based on. So you should, for best practice, restate everything, not just those things that change.
And I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. Okay. You have to be clear.
Yeah.
On all of this.
I'm
It
really
just
glad that was
clarifies
brought
that
up. Yeah,
it really clarifies that the main points of the contract have all been agreed to, right? So there's no misunderstanding.
Okay. Everybody, any more questions on counteroffers, what they should look like, how we should do them? No? Okay.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So you had the statement, this doc should be for informational purposes only. But then you had the lender statement.
They're two different things.
Right. The first one is that only if the other agent is really pushing, and then the lender is a separate, statement.
Yes, the two different things. This is the suggested language that we want you to use in that case where the seller is signing, okay, where the other agent is insisting and you've gone through the language in the counteroffer. But they're still pushing and if you feel that, okay, we'll have the seller sign it, but if the seller's gonna sign it, then you have to put in the statement that this document is for informational purposes only, to clarify that we don't have confusion between the terms that are gonna govern the actual contract. Okay,
Understood. I just want to make sure of the
Yeah,
differences.
yeah.
So that one's for the
That's-
agent, the other one's for the lender. Got
that's
it.
for the agent, yes, that's for the agent, and this one is for the lender.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
And that
Mhm.
clarification would be kept in a separate file. It'd be a separate document in .loop. You wouldn't replace the governing document with that informational document. You'd keep them both in there.
Yeah. Exactly. Good point, Jeff. Okay.
Say
And
that
going-
again? I did not follow that.
Yeah, so your contract document that includes the counter is your actual contract. This other informational thing for the lender would be a separate document in .loop. You wouldn't replace the actual contract with the counter offer together with the informational document. It's just like a accessory document.
Yes.
Does that make sense? Just in your file setup in the loop.
No, the informational one is for the realtor who insists on the
Yes.
seller's
So
signature.
it's just going to be, it's not a governing control document. It's just an informational document. So you're going to have two sets. You're going to have two contracts in your loop. You're going to have the real one and the fake one.
So just, are you saying PDF the original and add that verbiage? So that you have two in there? One with the verbiage and one without?
I shouldn't have said anything.
You can, what you can do is, Jeff has a good point. You could do it that way. And have two different documents, or you can just go back, have this language added to additional terms. And you just have one. But Jeff, I think Jeff makes a good point that if you do it that way and you have two versions, again, I don't know how careful you have to be with that though, Jeff.
Yeah, well, Ruth, if you just go and add this verbiage on the original one, aren't you gonna erase the buyer's initials and signature? So you'd have to PDF it
You
and
have
add
to,
it
because,
on,
well,
right?
because of dot loop, you have to, because of dot
And
loop. you
then
to
have your
PDF it.
seller sign it.
Yeah, because of dot loop, you'd have to do it that way.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah, you would have to do that. But I
So
think that, go
if,
ahead.
I'm sorry, if we did it that way, I like that with the two, the two. Uh, how, is there a certain way you'd like to see that distinguished within dot loop? Number one or number two, or?
Here's the thing. As I think through this, okay, I'm thinking through this suggestion. I don't know that you want two documents. I think if this is the case, we go back and we add it to the original contract, and we have just one version of the contract.
yeah, but you
I'm
still
it's
have to
gonna get
PDF it, though.
Yeah, you're still gonna PDF it, yeah.
Yeah, so
And
you
add-
don't lose your buyer's signatures.
Yeah, I think you just want one because it's gonna get too confusing. Because remember, at some point, all of this is gonna go to the bank if there's financing.
Right.
But
Okay.
this
Because
language
once
is,
you've done that, you can archive the other one.
Just
It's
do the
still
one.
there if you need it, but it's not gonna
Right.
be confusing.
But again, it gets to not having to do it at all by not having that seller signature, by not
Right.
having to do that. And I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're really comfortable with all of this and that you can have the discussion with the agent on the other side who is asking for this. I think it gets down to our ability with our knowledge of the contract and our knowledge of what the ramifications can be, and to have I won't say a convincing argument, but an accurate argument based on fact. And that's what you're going to have to do, because most of the people on the other side, other than us, they don't understand this. Okay, it's just something because they haven't had an opportunity to delve into it, to talk about it, so they don't do that. So, and they don't understand it, and I see it time and time again. So this should give you the means to have those conversations and to be able to get people to understand why you can't go that way. Do you all feel more comfortable about this?
I have a
About how to
question.
handle this?
Definitely.
Yes, ma'am. Natalie, it's you. You have the question?
Yes, ma'am. Playing devil's advocate, 'cause I've had it happen. Say you do go, like how your language in the bottom part says, in the event of any conflict between initial offer and executed offer shall govern. Long story short, say something happens with an escrow dispute or something, and you now have, this language. Is this still the original contract? Like, when you have to submit all of those documents, or do you need to have the initial offer and the executed counteroffer without that verbiage in there if something like that were to happen?
Okay.
That's probably a lengthy question for the hotline, but I'm just
I
curious.
guess I don't understand your concern about this.
Well, I'm going back to Jeff's I guess that doesn't, never mind.
There should not be two, as I
Yeah.
think through this, there should not be two. There should be one version. And, with this in it to avoid any problems, okay? So
Touche.
again, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If the lender comes back, that's what we want to do.
This language this language sounds perfectly clear where it's acknowledging there is a counteroffer that governs, any change. So, I mean, I don't see this being a problem with a
Shouldn't
dispute.
be. It shouldn't be. You don't have to, Natalie, you don't have to add that last sentence. You can just use the basic provision. You don't have to. You could, that's why it said you may also add if you're really concerned about restating it again.
You have to have the buyers initial this, like after your sellers sign, and then you add this to the additional terms. Does the buyers need to initial this?
No.
Okay.
No. But I know with FHA, they come back every time now. They want to see the seller signature.
This sounds like both parties have to sign this additional language. The parties acknowledge and agree. That means everybody has to sign, right?
I think you're right. When I had a conversation yesterday about this, I won't tell you which attorney. They said, no, it's just the seller, but I think in the language, it does say that. So I would agree with you, Annalise. I think you're right, that the buyer should initial it, yeah. I think you're right. Okay. Anybody else have any questions about this? Okay, I want all of you to feel comfortable with counteroffers, and if you have any questions, you call Jeff, you call Frank, you call me. We'll be happy to walk you through it. I owe you the language for the other issue. And which issue is it that you wanted the other language for?
I would like to get language for making the offer or counteroffer not null and void for the date passing.
Well, okay, we'll get you that. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, you're gonna
Can I
send
add a
that out to
comment to-
everybody, Ruth, so I can get it?
Yes, I'll send it to everybody.
Yeah, okay.
I
This
think,
was so informative. I so appreciate it. I'm so glad I watched.
Yeah,
okay.
this was badass. Thank you so much, Ruth.
Ruth, I have another question.
You do, Natalie.
So when you're your buyer submits your offer and you have a counter offer form and you're going through, and in that it's on page, this is as is contract. It's on page 12, I think, where you check that box
Yes.
that the seller counters that offer. Usually
Yes.
I have them initial that page along with initialing right next to also where that box is checked. Is it recommended to do both like that, or can the seller just sign that page once submitting that counter offer?
The seller initials the bottom of that page. It's page 12 that you're talking about where the seller
Correct.
counteroffer box is. So the seller is going to check the box. They're going to initial the bottom of every page in the
Correct.
contract form. Okay, they're just not going to sign page 13.
Correct. So that's what I'm saying. Like, do we have to put an additional initial next to
No.
it?
No.
Okay, because
I
I've had
do-
it come
no.
both ways, so that's why I was curious.
Well,
I do
mean,
the same
there's-
thing, just
There's
to make,
nothing that says you have to, but if you want to, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay. Any other
Well-
questions about that?
Can I just add a little comment because it's
Of course.
imminent? Okay, it's unrelated but eminent. As of Saturday, the 15th, Fannie Mae will no longer require credit score in review for a mortgage, for being approved for a mortgage. So credit score has been done away with by Fannie Mae as of Saturday. So you might see an increase in the number of applications.
Well, isn't that interesting?
Good point.
Scary.
Good to know.
As you can see here, we were going to have a big discussion on seller financing, so I think we won't. I mean, on regular financing, on the financing contingency in the contract, because that can be very confusing to a lot of people. So we don't have time to delve into that today, so that'll be pushed over and it'll be added to the list of what's going to happen in the following sessions. So I'll add it to this. We're going to be talking then about the financing contingency. I'll add it to that. Seller financing. I want to talk about release and cancellations too, because we've had some interesting circumstances with those lately. And it's then at some point we'll go into how to handle issues that come up out of the home inspections. We're going to talk about walkthroughs, how those should be handled. And as part of all of this is how to write an addendum to address things like those things that come out of home inspections and how to get them into the contract using the addendums. And remember, an addenda, there's two different things. We talk about addenda, right? And you see the addenda provision in the contract. Addenda is in addition to the contract. An addendum is a change to the contract. They're two separate things. So that's what's coming up in the next series. I'd appreciate any suggestions that you have for things you want to cover. We're going to go through some of the things in the contract, but and then we'll move into the vacant land contract. We'll talk about that one. We'll talk because there are some different provisions in that. So anybody have any questions about what we talked about today?
No, but I got one. When you say addenda, do we have a form in Dotloop in the templates for an addenda?
No, addenda, okay, as I said, is an addition to the contract. An addendum is a change. If you look at page 11 of the contract, Trish, you will see the list of addenda. It's the
Okay,
kind of,
gotcha. I gotcha.
okay.
Okay,
Those
I
are
thought
the
when you were-
addenda.
Yeah, I just misunderstood. I thought when you were talking about that, you were talking about something different.
No,
Okay,
no, okay.
Gotcha.
And then
I
we
got
have,
it.
okay, and then we have the blank addendum form to use for addendums, okay?
Correct. Right.
Okay.
Okay.
so Ruth, I mean, you don't have to answer this time, but like a counter offer obviously makes the original offer null and void in a sense, right? Well, not null
No.
and void, but like
No.
a counter, if you counter, that means the original offer is unaccepted. So
No, what it's saying is,
No.
it says it's a rejection of the original offer, right?
right,
You
but you can't
reject-
go back and accept, like you can't go
No.
back and sign that and say, you know what I'm saying?
No.
Like you can't go back and say, all right, well, we will do that and sign it, and
No.
then that
No,
doesn't
it's
work.
called, no, it's called reviving the contract. You can't revive that contract. What the counteroffer has just done is just made changes, okay, to some of the terms in the contract, but accepted everything else except for those things that are called out in the counteroffer. Okay, but once you do that, you can't go back and revive.
That original.
Yeah, that's what they call it, reviving the original. Yeah, you can't do that.
So
Is
how
that
do
the
you
same
handle
thing?
that?
Yeah, go ahead.
How do you handle that if you decide you want to go back and sign the offer?
Yeah.
Like, example, the buyer made an offer and my seller said, no, I reject this offer. Here's my counter offer. And then
Yeah.
later decides that she said, you know what, I probably should have just taken that. So you just have them resubmit a new offer or?
A good question too, Naira. I think that you're going to, because now that offer is theoretically been terminated by are you talking about the counteroffer being signed by both parties? Or the counteroffer being out there?
Just the counter offer is out there.
You can withdraw it. Contract allows you to do that. If the other party hasn't signed it, you can send out right away. You can withdraw that counteroffer.
Right, but
Okay,
she's
so if
saying,
my
can you go
seller,
back? Yeah,
if
go
my
ahead.
seller, if we withdraw the counter offer to the buyer, we withdraw that, then we just go ahead and sign the original offer and it becomes,
Yes,
as
because
long as it's within
you've withdrawn, but you have to do it.
as long as it's within the time frame?
Yes,
Because,
it can be withdrawn if it's still within the acceptance period and the other party hasn't signed it.
okay.
It can be
So
withdrawn.
okay, so if I'm thinking about this offer, it was just, I'm in a situation like this. So if my seller then decides, you know what, I'm an idiot, I should have taken that, then, and it's the time for acceptance has passed, we can just sign a counter offer saying that we've accepted the original offer?
You just lost me in all of that.
Yeah, I
Um,
probably lost myself.
okay,
All right, so to say that there was an offer submitted.
yeah,
The seller rejected that and rejected it by coming, giving a counter offer. And
okay.
the buyer is saying, nope, that was it. That's all I can do. What I originally offered is all I can do. So, so now we're, out of time. And the seller then says, I wish I would have taken that. And I called the other agent and say, you know what, my seller changed their mind. They weren't happy with that offer, but they said they'll accept it. What do I do at that point?
If I'm understanding you, the counteroffer was out there by the seller. Seller wants to withdraw it because they've
Yes.
changed their mind.
Yes,
Okay,
they want to accept the original offer as it was presented.
okay. Well, once the accept time for acceptance ended, and that's what you're saying.
Uh-huh.
You're saying the time for
Yes.
acceptance of the counteroffer? Well, the counteroffer is dead.
Okay.
Okay, it
thought-
wasn't accepted.
No,
I thought it was dead no matter what. As soon as you did a counter, I thought if it's the counter's not accepted, that original offer I thought was dead. So you can't go ahead and just sign those documents, even if you're within the time frame, because you countered, it killed it. That's what I thought, but I'm not.
It would kill it if the other party signed it.
But now that
Okay.
the sellers want to accept the buyer's offer, can't they just do a counter offer saying changing the date of acceptance?
You could.
And then they both buyer and
could.
seller both have to sign that counter offer of
You could-
changing the
you-
acceptance
yeah.
date.
You could do that.
or
But-
just submit another, you
You know,
have the buyer submit another contract to sign it with different dates.
yeah, because
So
that's
it's a lot cleaner that way, and because the seller
Mhm.
has already said, I'm gonna accept it if you submit it again.
yeah, that would be the
Okay.
better way to, that would be
Yeah.
that would be the cleaner way to do it.
Yeah, okay, that makes
Because
sense.
because all your dates are gonna change.
Okay, all right, thanks, everybody.
Okay. Anybody else?
I just wanted to know, is this gonna be a recording? Like you're gonna send out the recording of this?
Steve is, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Now, what we're doing is we're putting all of the slides from Jeff, mine, Frank's presentations during the series. They're all going back at you. So I have the September slides are there. Steve has the recordings available. So they'll be there in sales meeting next week. I'll show you where they are in Bag because I have to finish loading them. So you'll have at least the slides to refer to, and then Steve has everything available in terms of the actual recording itself.
And
Okay,
Ruth,
awesome. That
if I
was my
could,
next question, where it was. Thank you.
Ruth, if I could add into that. So any of the trainings that I've been doing, I am also posting to my YouTube channel, which is for CB Schmidt agents only. And if if it's up to Ruth and Jeff, if they want to do the same, I'll be happy to post them up there as well to make them easy to access. So, but if you want any of the trainings I've done, they are on it's called CB Shrek Frank on YouTube.
Yeah, I would like it, Frank, if you would put mine on there, that would be great.
Sure, I
Hey,
can do
Ruth,
that.
Ruth, same, just a quick, I know you're going to go over this next time, because you're going to talk about inspections later. But when an inspection goes through and you want to maybe ask the seller for whatever contribution, is that going to be treated also like the same as what a counter would do, where you're killing the original contract? So if they don't, the seller has an option of we're totally done. I don't have to, you can say no, or is it also give the seller the opportunity to get out of the original contract?
Doesn't give the seller the opportunity to get out of the original contract. It's something we're going to talk about, Annalise, but very quickly, we have the inspection. As a result of the inspection, we see a number of issues. The buyer sees a number of issues that they want the seller to take care of, repair of different things, or, they want that dealt with. So you have to get those things together and write an addendum that outlines that. The buyer requests the seller to do the following, and you have to be specific with whatever it is. Okay. It's an addendum. It has to be taken care of and resolved prior to the expiration of the inspection period. So we can't, and we do it through an addendum. Does not give the seller the opportunity to get out of the contract. It's a request from the buyer to the seller to take care of these additional items. Okay, that's what it is. The seller can then negotiate it, okay, like anything else, or reject it. I mean, that's the way it works. So, but again, the thing I caution everybody about is you have the inspection period, and then the inspection period ends at whatever time you've designated in the contract. And then the day after that, or the hours after that, now the buyer says, well, this is what I want. It's too late. It has to be taken care of, resolved, whatever it is, before that inspection period ends. So if you're going to have an addendum addressing these things, it has to be taken care of before that ends, not after the fact.
And that's why it's so important in my eyes to make sure that the agent on the other side and I are on the same page as far as the dates.
Correct. I had one about 2 weeks ago, inspection period, a couple of things came up. Nobody addressed it until a day or two later, and it was too late. And buyer wasn't happy, agent wasn't happy, but they let things go, and the seller has no obligation. So, okay. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, with what Naira was talking about, if the it sounds like if the original offer went out and then the seller countered and then changed their mind and wanted to go back and sign that original offer, the buyer has the right to say, even though they didn't retract it in writing, the buyer has the option of saying, no, that's no longer, my offer's off the table. Like, that's, I think, the difference.
Again, if an offer is out there, okay, and the seller hasn't signed it, again, the contract says you can withdraw it. You can withdraw an offer prior to the other party signing. So you can do that, but it gets a little convoluted when there's a counter offer out there.
Right. I think the counter gives the other party the option of no longer agreeing to what was originally out there without even putting it in writing that the offer's retracted. I think that's what that might do. I'll call, we can figure it out later. I just think that's what that does.
Well, the other thing is that the buyer has, whatever the inspection period time is, they can withdraw at any time during that inspection period too.
They can withdraw what during the inspection period?
The offer, the contract, they can, right?
No. Oh, the buyer can, at their sole
Cancel.
discretion.
Right.
Okay.
Cancel it.
Because remember, one of the things that we call the inspection period,
It's a free
Brian,
look.
is a free look. So during the inspection period, that's the opportunity for the buyer to change their mind about going forward. Okay?
Correct. Yeah.
So if during the inspection, let's say, there are a number of issues that come up with regard to the property, and the buyer may says, you know what, I don't even want to deal with this. This is a lot more than I anticipated coming out of this, so I don't want to move forward. So if you look at the language in the inspection period, it talks about at the buyer's sole discretion. It can also be, I changed my mind. I got cold feet. I decided I don't want to go through this, or I found another property, whatever the reason. Buyer never has to give you a reason. That's why the language sole discretion is in there. All they have to do is notify you in writing and say, I don't want to move forward with this transaction. Okay, and then you do a release and cancellation. But they don't even have to tell you why. But that's what happens, Naira. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you.
But it has to be a written notification to you, not verbal, not texted. It has to be an email that says, this is what I want to do. And then you got to get that release and cancellation out. And we're going to talk about those. Okay. Okay, unless we have anything else. Jeff, you have anything?
Jeff had to bug out. He had another call.
Okay, Frank, anything else from you?
Nope, this was great.
Ruth, are
Okay.
you going to do the financing next week? I know
Yeah.
on the list yesterday, it was set for another topic, but are you going to do the financing instead?
No, because the next topic is Jeff.
Okay. Okay.
So we're going to do the financing when I come up in the rotation again. Okay, so which is I don't know, I have to look at the dates. It's so yes, we're going to do the financing, and we're going to talk about seller financing at the same time. So, okay. Well, thank you all. I appreciate your attendance today. I hope you find it helpful. Call me. I know I owe you. I have some homework here, so I have to get you some language. And I'll get the actual, what we saw here in the slides, the language here, I'll get it out to you separately.
And Ruth,
Okay.
I threw up the
Thank
link
you.
to the YouTube channel in the chat. If you want